You're listening to Second Cut. This is the weekly podcast from thefilmmagazine.com where we talk about topics in film theory, history, criticism, whatever else I say here. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who is being compelled by Christ. Sam has his foot in his mouth. What was that?
Nah, I couldn't think of anything, so I thought I shoved the fake foot in my mouth.
I'm very upset that you don't have any fava beans and a Chianti next to you.
Yeah, too short notice.
Yeah, I am Kieran. I am the one who thankfully does not use videotapes anymore. I mean, realistically, that intro should have been done completely silently, because obviously Sadako does not speak in the thing. But
I mean, we know whenever this inevitably remade again, it's going to be a TikTok video, isn't it?
Well, they did do that with Rings, didn't they? Which I refused to watch so far. Although I probably will go and rank them all at some point for TFM. But hey, we are talking about a different list today.
And I also avoided saying I'm the one whose mother, you know, but that was the first line that popped in my head. So at the Film Magazine, we, and by we, I mean mostly Kieran with contributions from others, wrote a list called 50 Unmissable Horror Films. And they're films that are influential, important, ones maybe you haven't heard of for some of the earlier ones that you should check out. And, you know, because we are only three people and we really wanted to talk about three exciting ones, we picked three, but I mean, we can go back to this well every Halloween.
I mean, realistically, what we should have done is just gone. We're just throwing it open. We're just going to discuss the list as a whole. But the format that we've got at the moment, until we decide to do one-offs, is that everyone picks a film. Hence, we've got this format. Realistically, what we should have just done is gone, let's argue this list. And admittedly, because all three of us were involved in kind of running down the list to make this up. We could have done 100 most influential horror films. We could have very easily, and probably we end up in some form going 50 influential horror films you haven't seen, kind of thing. Yeah. They're the ones that have slipped through the net, because as I rightly thought when we first came up with this, about 35 to 40 of them are pretty much, even if we don't think they should be on the list, we know why they're on the list, kind of thing, you know. And there were five of us picking kind of the list out, and I'll have to say, I think just under half of them everybody said should be on there. So there's a load that everyone was going to shove on, but there were a few interesting ones, and a few that some people fought valiantly for, and some that people fought valiantly for that unfortunately didn't make the cut. But that's what happens when you have 50 for an entire genre.
Yeah, like Twilight. Very important to the horror romantic comedy, or just romance crossover.
I think it was very important to essentially give vampire films a kick up the backside of this is what you need to do. And unfortunately for you, Twilight came out in 2008, and so did Let the Right One In. So that's kind of, okay, we're at that point where only one's going to make it. We know which one's going in.
Yeah. But before we get to that, Kieran, you asked a question that, I mean, one person answered that wasn't us, but we can now answer. Kieran, what were those questions that you asked?
Let me relook at them. Yes, because initially it was one question, and then I kind of split it up into three. So I mean, anyone else can jump in the comments down below on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this on. Send us an email. We still have the email. I think we do. But really, it's kind of, you know, what's your favorite scary movie? Obviously. And then I
did the voice.
No, I'm not going to do Roger Jackson. I'm not going to do Mojo Jojo's voice. That's the thing I love. Ghostface's voice by the same guy that did Mojo Jojo from Powerpuff Girls. It's amazing.
That's amazing.
I know. One of my favorite links ever. So what's your favorite horror film? Then secondly, what is the best horror film? Because often the two don't go together. Sometimes they do, but other times you're like, my favorite film is an absolutely trashy film that I know is not good. So what is a good film might be different. And then what films slip through the net purely for the fact we've only got 50 films, and we kind of had to do a bit of a democracy. And Margaret, who is one of our team members, who also helped make the list. Bram Stoker's Dracula is her favorite, which I think was on our initial list. I made a list of like 130, 140. Went,
really, we could have just had 50 versions of Dracula. Couldn't we? There's that many too. So
there are enough. Yeah. Best movie is The Exorcist, which is going to be discussed today. And again, The Exorcist is one of those ones where you go, can't argue with it. Mark Kermode reckons it's the best film of all time. So who am I to argue?
There's a handful that no one will argue with, I think.
Yeah, The Exorcist was one of them. And then one that didn't make the cut was Black Christmas. And that's an interesting one. Unfortunately, Black Christmas gets overlooked by the fact that Texas Chainsaw came out the same year. But I think Black Christmas was on my initial massive list. I'm now going to have to check that, because if we make unseen ones, that will come in.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I'm sure it was on the long list initially. I say with Texas Chainsaw, that's another one that most people wouldn't object to if someone said that's the greatest film, horror film of all time. Yeah, it's definitely up there. And
yeah, I remember Mark coming on and saying that he watched Texas Chainsaw after like a 14-hour horror marathon, coming up at like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and when you're just that tired and like dead, Texas Chainsaw just hits differently, and it is still ridiculously shocking. And like, there's just some parts of it are kind of comical. Like the first 30 minutes, let's be fair, like with the interplay between the teenagers is, we're just getting into how this should be done. And then when they get to the house, the whole thing just switches. And not only the first kill, but I think we all know Meat Hook is one of those. I think is one of those like wince moments. Possibly that, I think, and the needle pit from Saw 2 are two of the ones where you go, ah.
And it's so much more horrible because you hardly see anything. It's all done in the edit. But your imagination does all the work. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And then you came in, Sam. So those three, Black Christmas, very influential. There on Black Christmas, for how influential it is, there is a story I heard once in a book called Blood Money, which I can't remember who it's by. I'm looking it up now. Blood Money slash. First dive into the first team slasher cycle. The book is by Richard Noel from 2011. I read it in 2016, just before my horror module. And there's a story in there that apparently John Carpenter called up Bob Clark, who wrote, but definitely directed Black Christmas 1974, which if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil too much, but please go see it. And essentially, apparently at the end of this phone call, Bob Clark said, if I was ever going to do a sequel, I was going to have the killer, for the antagonist from the first film, who was arrested, escape many years later, and goes, I was going to do it on Halloween. That is the only time I've ever heard that story in, the over a decade of, let's be honest, being in horror movies kind of academically. I haven't heard it anywhere else. I kind of wish it was true, and at the same time, I kind of wish it wasn't. But yeah, Black Christmas is one of those that's kind of very influential.
Wait, so is it a prequel to Halloween? Is that what you're saying?
Some theorize, although some also theorize that there's a theory that Psycho is a prequel to Halloween. That because Dr. Loomis, Sam Loomis, is named after Sam Loomis from Halloween. From Psycho even, and there's a theory that after the whole thing with Norman Bates, he decided in kind of Marion's honor to become a psychiatrist, and one of his first patients was Michael Myers, and therefore it goes on. There's the theory, but it's kind of the same one that's like, there's also the theory that Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone became Jigsaw. It's not going to happen. But yeah. And then Sam, I've just seen that you put yours in, so I guess me and Jacob have to do ours.
Well, Sam, what are yours?
So my favourite horror film is 28 Days Later. I mean, it's the one I've seen the most, and one I'll happily go back to year after year, and it just always delivers for me, And
how excited are you for 28 years later?
Yeah, I think. Well, I'm more excited that I'm kind of. I mean, Dan Ball kind of come back to kick off the new kind of series, and then and Ned Costa taking over. It's interesting. I'm more excited that they've got Alex Garland back because I think his kind of lean kind of screenplay writing kind of style fits that world really well. So I'll be
Yep.
interested to see what new ideas he's come up with. In that story a few decades later. So
Well, when he's not ripping off Apocalypse Now and Day of the Triffids.
yeah. But yeah, I'm a big fan of that one. I was listening to the soundtrack the other day. I mean, that's that's one of my go-to horror soundtracks as well. It's good writing music.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the best really is normally a toss-up for me between a few. But I think in the end, I went to The Shining. I don't think there's many who would argue that. I just think it's one of those that really just completely sucks you in, kind of. Yeah, it's like a demon on his shoulders. Though it's actually you almost go through the same experience as like Jack Torrance does. Once you're in there, it's you kind of it's like a full body experience. And I think it's a great depiction of like descent into madness, and for me, it's one of the best kind of supernatural kind of horrors out there. So I'd always go for that one as for me probably the greatest horror films out there. And then again, it was on our long list, I think. But but the one that didn't quite make the cut for me was Possession, which I saw for the first time this week, and wow, that's an experience. I mean, it's the most toxic marriage breakdown you've ever seen. It's just just this couple screaming at each other for 2 hours, and then Lovecraftian monster kind of comes into the mix
Right at the end,
through.
for no reason.
Yeah. But that's again another draining experience, and you gotta love the commitment of the actors to just completely kind of lose themselves in the role. Just completely fearless performances.
I'm going to pull you up, Sam, on one of your things there, because you said The Shining was the greatest horror movie of all time. I've just checked your list of the 10 best films of all time.
Called out.
And The Shining is not on there. However, The Silence of the Lambs is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get into this because this comes down to whether you consider Silence of the Lambs a horror or not, or something else.
Are we doing that?
Yeah.
We can fight that later. But my list will be a bit quicker because we've already discussed it. But my favorite's The Shining. I can watch that over and over again. If I had to say a movie we haven't said, I guess I'd pick The Witch, or The Vivitch, however you say it.
Witch, don't do that.
I like the
don't
stylization.
Be that guy.
That movie really captured me when I saw it. I still love it. Pardon me. The best one. I mean, we've said it multiple times. Way too many to pick. I'll go with Psycho. Like that. That's such a good place to go to when you're like, where does modern horror really stem from? I will go to Psycho as like kind of that split off point between the monster movies of the golden age of Hollywood versus like the more modern violent horror films. And then finally, what's one
Andrew
on the
Tudor
list?
would agree with you.
Insidious. That may have been where I got the argument from. Insidious is the one left off that I would have really fought for. Because like that's an experience in theaters that really captured me. I think it is a better movie than The Conjuring. The Conjuring's just more refined.
Yeah, and that universe is just so much more kind of interesting and eccentric than the Conjuring one ever was. So.
Yeah, the Conjuring is just an Amityville remake that spun off.
And it looks like that lipstick face monster is about to appear in your room, Kieran.
Darth Maul. Should I change the lights back from my Halloween to the white?
Striking.
That was my other quick kind of last minute costume idea, was just cover my whole face in red, but I didn't want to have to wash all that off tonight.
Very quickly, Jacob, I'm going to say on your top 10 films of all time.
I know The Shining's there, and the problem
Psycho
is
isn't.
Sam has already said The Shining for something,
You're
and then
allowed
I
to say
said
The
it,
Shining.
and then I said it for my favorite. So I'm trying to give us some variety.
Yeah. To be honest, I Yeah, I do consider Silence of the Lambs a horror, but I consider other things as well. And it's that on my list, I think, was more of a personal thing because it would be on my, as well as my film magazine greatest films of all time. It's also my personal top 10 films of all time, as Silence of the Lambs or as The Shining. I think as a standout for the genre as a whole, I think it's yeah, that's kind of how I'm viewing it.
Okay, if I got to do my picks then, right? My favorite, because I will go back on and kind of back up things I've said. In our very first episode, me and Jacob did our top 5 favorite films of all time.
I know what this is going to be.
And number 2 was The Shining. So
I thought you were going to say The Whalesing.
The Whalesing was at number 3. You see, so it is The Shining, and The Shining is the film that got me into kind of looking into film theory and film criticism, essentially of watching YouTube videos of them going the plot and the layout of The Shining doesn't make sense of the Overlook Hotel, and going down that rabbit hole kind of when films are more than just what's put on screen. There's subtleties in there, and I got interested in that. So for me personally, it's a very personal kind of a leaping off point, kind of academically. As well. My best, I think I have 2 possible options from my top 10 best films list. One of them has already been said, which is Psycho, but the other one is The Thing. So either, I think, just in the sake of variety, I will say The Thing. Because it's The Thing. Sorry, John Carpenter's The Thing, technically, to differentiate it from the 2011 movie. And then a movie that was missed off that I would have loved to see in there. There's a lot. In terms of influence, one that was on there that I don't think anybody of the people that were helping to put this list together voted for, but I will very much go for. Well, there's a few, but I will, even though it was a TV thing, I will stick to Ghostwatch, because I don't think we would have found footage movies without Ghostwatch.
Yeah.
It would have developed eventually, but what that did was so kind of randomly daring out of absolutely nowhere to put on British TV a fake kind of ghost hunting thing with known TV personalities in the UK, and then like have the studio that they're in get haunted and possessed and present it like War of the Worlds. It was the TV version of the War of the Worlds broadcast, and it's never been broadcast on BBC since. There were like 20,000 phone calls in it that broke the BBC's phone lines. Like it did such a thing, and it's one of those milestones that kind of the influence is still being felt 32 years later, because it was broadcast 32 years ago today, because it was on Halloween 1992. It was their Halloween special. So I think that if there was going to be another one, I might vote for one of Nigel Neal's shorts, something like "Oh Whistle I'll Come to You," which started off the Ghost Story for Christmas trend, and it's Nigel Neal. So
yeah.
Kieran, what's one that isn't a TV show that you would say?
Shush you. I mean, I wanted to argue for The Haunted Castle, the Georges Méliès, 1896, because it's the first one with bats in a castle and coffins and stuff like that, but it's not really horror.
At least it would have been exhibited in a theater type format.
Shush you. I'm now gonna have to think one that was actually a feature film shown in theaters that didn't make the cut. Yeah, there's a lot. I don't think in terms of like influence or importance, but one of the best ones that we didn't have that didn't make it was The Descent. Because it's The Descent. Either that or Dog Soldiers, which, let's be honest, is just werewolves, aliens. That's it. It's great for it. Unfortunately, those kind of don't have the legacy or impact.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think they would do if Neil Marshall had done good stuff since that time.
Yeah,
it's been mistake after mistake since Game of Thrones aside, unfortunately.
Yeah, actually, something like Cube might.
Yeah.
Because I think that's had an influence, definitely on something like Saw, things like that. And Vincenzo Natali's done other good stuff since. So I think it's one of those that's kind of very surreptitiously come in.
What about Abbott and Costello Meet the Wolfman?
What for the full moon change? Yeah.
Well,
What
I'm
am I?
thinking
No,
because
no, for the
Th-
no.
that's
That was Frankenstein meets
yes,
the Wolfman. Yeah.
oh yeah.
Abbott and
yeah,
Costello meets the Wolfman is
Abbott
where
and
they go
Costello.
full
No, Abbott
comedy.
and Costello meet Frankenstein is where they meet all three monsters. They meet,
Oh, okay,
they
yeah.
meet Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, again played by Bela Lugosi, and Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. Yeah.
Because I was thinking AVP, but I was like, surely there's been something before that that is similar, and there
Yeah,
was.
the first kind of crossover was Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, the first of their monster rallies, as it is.
Yeah.
That could be another one.
Which we have discussed on this show.
Yes, and again, the trouble with this is there are loads of stuff that you could argue that we just didn't have room for, or
Yeah,
we tried to do it as
you talked about
democratically as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you talked about Hammer, didn't you? Which
yeah,
obviously was a shame that didn't make it onto the list. But there's always
yeah.
next year.
Yeah, it was a case of we did a massive list and there were 5 of us and we voted for our 50, and then the ones that got all 5 votes went in, and then it was the next lot of 4 votes that went in, then it's the next lot of 3, and then that got us to like sort of 41, 42, and then there was a load with 2 that we had to essentially fight for and re-vote down, and just Hammer didn't make the list. There's some stuff like Eyes Without a Face that didn't make the list, Cannibal Holocaust didn't make it, and that was just for a route.
And we didn't get any Korean stuff on there either, I don't think.
Yeah, and
No.
also they are all ranked, not ranked. They are chronological. So
Yeah. I was going to say the thing with no Korean stuff is we were kind of looking at important and influential and kind of almost the legacy of them, which is why kind of there's a load in the 70s and not as many.
Arguably, the Korean horror stuff has been more influential on TV in recent years. Because there's so many like kind of genre kind of streaming series out of Korea.
Like
usually
Squid Game and stuff like that.
A horror or sci-fi flavor.
Yeah, and as we discussed before when we did, Swiri, whatever it was like that.
Yeah, Shiri.
In kind of their biggest kind of thing, realistically, their film industry really re-kicked into gear in the year 2000. So in terms of, they obviously had a film industry before that, but we're just not as aware of it, and there will be stuff there. Yeah. And in terms of influence globally, you've only had sort of 24, 25 years of it. So it's just essentially the more recent stuff hasn't had the time to become easily identifiable as important and influential, as opposed to something like Psycho, which has been around for 64 years, which is again why I think stuff like Dog Soldiers and that were less likely to make the cut. But again, we had 50 slots and there are about 150, 200 that we could have shoved in if we wanted to.
Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. There's so many. All right. Are we ready to get into 3 out of 50 unmissable? These might be arguably not the most unmissable, because I don't know about Ring, but they're among them.
I think we've picked 3 of the biggest, definitely.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons.
Yeah. But I'll go first because I picked the oldest one. The Exorcist was released in 1973. And
in the States.
Yeah, in the States.
In the UK, it was 1974, and I know that because before coming on, the radio was on downstairs, and the BBC radio played the Exorcist theme tune, and they said 1974, and I had to look it up so that I wouldn't get mad at the BBC. And in the UK, it did come out in March 74, so I let them off the hook.
Initially released in 1973. Yes, and did he make the French Connection before this?
Yes,
William
he did.
Friedkin? Yeah, so
French Connection was 71.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what he had made. By the way, one of the cops from the French Connection was in one of the movies we did a couple weeks ago. I think he was in one of the ones I did, one of the Scorsese movies. But yeah, anyway, the Exorcist, pretty much, this is probably tough to say, but on a commercial level, it changed the horror movie industry to a very significant degree. It made tons of money. It was groundbreaking in terms of its special effects. And when you say it's one of the best, like it's one of the most impactful, in addition to being one of the most enjoyable and what are the others? Striking, horrific, all of those things. And, I'll always go back to this. This is the era where things are changing in Hollywood. And in the 1960s, you couldn't necessarily have a movie with a 12-year-old girl vomiting all over the place, saying the C word
On a priest as
on
well.
a priest, you know, masturbating with a crucifix. Like, it's a shocking film, still today, really.
Especially if you're not familiar with the genre. And I mean, I think now we've had so many years where blood and guts go everywhere.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like misreporting like these days. Again, we talked about the substance last and a few other things last week. All these, they're like a report of audience members fainted and threw up during this, and yeah, it's probably kind of a bit exaggerated for today, you know, to get clicks and to get a bit of traction. But back in the 70s, I think you could probably believe it.
Well,
Yeah, it's a bit like the
Well,
thing
there's so
with,
little to compare it to, you know.
yeah, and it's a bit like the thing with the train arriving at the station. That everyone was running away because they thought the train was going to crash through. The anecdotes start coming up like a year after it was first shown, so it's like we have no evidence that they were doing this at all.
Although you did have real priests and nuns blessing people as they were going into the cinema with holy water.
Was that real, or was that a marketing gimmick, like a William Castle style? You know,
it could well have been. I wouldn't put it past Friedkin, but yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there were picket lines saying like ban this movie and that kind of thing, but hilariously enough, the Catholic Church endorsed it. So
Well, and that's what really interests me about this movie. So I obviously, before I saw this, I'd seen some more modern possession films. And those films, like, they assume you're familiar with all of this now, and they kind of yada yada over the reason. And one thing I love about The Exorcist is it spends a lot of time on the both the secular nature of, like, scientifically looking at what's wrong with Reagan, and then also Father Karras dealing with his, like, doubt in God, and sort of like putting those two things together before he is brought in to expel the demon from the little girl. But yeah, I mean, before we get into that stuff, guys, I'm sure you've heard this, but this film production was cursed. Now I forget exactly why, so I'm quickly skimming. Shooting was delayed because a bird flew into a circuit breaker. Woo! That is spooky. Let's see. Someone fractured their coccyx. I mean, that's terrible for them. That's not exactly spooky. Let's see.
I mean,
looks
hilariously
like
enough, I watched The Possession last night, which is now on Shudder, which was, if you want spooky, the car I was going to go and see to review for TFM months ago when my head gasket went, so I never got to review it for it. Is that a drinks bottle, Sam?
No,
Is the leg
no,
actually? I'll tell you what, if you hollow it out and make
It's
it
a
a drinks
foot.
bottle, that'd be amazing. You just look like you're gnawing on it, you're taking a swig. But yeah, in that, it's about... I'm not going to give too much away because it's not the worst ever.
Sam got too into Raw.
Yeah, certainly did. Yeah, Possession is essentially about the Russell Crowe's an actor as a priest on an exorcism movie, and real demon stuff starts happening on this exorcism movie. But they're going in. It's like, why have we got an extra priest thing? It's like, one, to help kind of, you know, look after the religious side of it and make sure that's fine. Two, all weird stuff happened on The Exorcist. You can never be too sure. So they reference the fact that The Exorcist was a cursed production in this kind of very slightly meta movie.
Yeah, and
So yeah, it was a thing.
here were some other things that happened. A night watch. These are terrible, but a night watchman died. The operator of the refrigeration system for Reagan's room died. An assistant cameraman's newborn, but there's an and, so I don't know if the operator died or if his newborn died, but 2 newborns died, maybe. And then Blair's grandfather died during the first week of production, and Max von Sydow's brother died during production. So, I mean, none of those sound like they're actually related to making the film. Wasn't Max von Sydow, like, really old when they were filming this?
No, it's all old age makeup.
He's old man makeup.
Yeah, he's only about 40s, late 40s, I think.
Oh, wow. It's very good old man makeup, because I'm always convinced he's super old when I watch this movie. Okay. I mean, but still, people die. That is unrelated to film production.
He would have been 43, I think, when they were making it, probably 43, 44, somewhere around there.
But
Yeah.
I
Born
mean,
in 1929, so yeah.
obviously those are not the best things special effects wise in this film. You have Linda Blair's head spinning around, which is awesome. You have the walking down the stairs like backwards spider, which I think
a
is
a sequence which was missing for years.
yeah,
Yep.
the special release in the year 2000, which I watched the director's cut. That's what the director's cut, the extended cut, whatever.
Which is amazing because I don't think I've ever seen the film without that scene, and I can't imagine
No.
it without that. It's one of the indelible images of it. I think it's great.
It's because they shot it and she had to be on wires and they couldn't find out a way to
Yeah.
get rid of the wires satisfactorily. I
Yeah.
think by the year
Yeah.
1999, 2000, they've managed to SFX it out.
Yeah, and then one that I didn't really think about until this time is when they're sticking the needle into her neck. It's a
yeah.
really cool special effects scene too. So because it's like it's a very long needle. There's a little mark in there. It's very cool.
Yeah, I think those hospital scenes, all the tests have been kind of invasive tests have been done to her in a lot of ways, kind of more distressing than anything supernatural in the film.
Yeah.
And so this time around, I was watching it, and so at the beginning, the mom in the movie, she's a movie star, and she's in a scene where people are protesting at a campus, and she goes and like scolds the protesters or something, but she's against tearing down a building, and it's all very confusing, and I don't think it has any actual relation to the plot in any way. And I was like, why isn't there some more like thematic correlation between what's happening in this fictional film that they're making? I mean, it's just one scene, but still it feels like a very small wasted opportunity to like have something to say.
I think it's I haven't actually seen The Exorcist in a while. I've seen bits, but I haven't seen it all the way through. I've probably read the book more recently, about sort of 6-7 years ago. Used it as a key study for one of my university things. But as Mark Kermode says, when he was absolutely ripping into Exorcist Believer that came out last year, which I have also done similarly, he goes, note to the filmmakers, it's not about the girl, the film's about everything else. And I think that scene is probably more about showing Chris McNeil's life and therefore its deterioration rather than anything to do with that. I agree they might have been able to just put something in. Maybe they were making a horror movie or something like that might do something.
Making a horror movie would have been better.
Yeah.
Which I think is what you were trying to bring in. And I think it also introduces one or two of the characters that then die later
I mean,
on.
all this stuff that kind of seems like quite Spurs, but I think it all adds kind of color to the story, you know, and kind of it only works kind of later on. You only care about what's happening to Reagan because you care so much about her and her relationship with her mum. You know, they established so strongly early on. So.
Yeah, I think the scene has reasons to be there, but I do agree that you could probably find ways to make it more thematically in keeping with the rest of the story, which is what you were trying to say. Yeah,
it's got reasons for sure. It's just like they take all of that time. Maybe it wasn't all that time in the extended cut, but like they couldn't find a way to say, oh, this building is being like possessed. No, nothing. Occupied.
It's a bit like whenever they're in a horror movie and teens are in a classroom. It's always an English classroom. They're always teaching a text that's directly related to whatever they're going through. You know,
which is better.
It's also like you never like. I am waiting for the time when it's like, oh, the evil is happening and they're doing something like, you know, Jane Austen.
Yeah,
completely tangentially unrelated at all.
That's exactly what this was.
If I ever write like a postmodern slasher, I will have them sit down and go, oh, we must have done something about this in English, and go, nope, completely unrelated, and move on.
Yeah. So I'd make sure to get a scene in there where they turn the news on at just the wrong moment. You know, they've missed the headline about the escape killer. You know, and they're just on like now for the other news.
Either that, or you have a scene in a classroom that doesn't happen for 30 seconds and then the bell rings. AKA, we finished the rest of this scene. How do we end it? Let's have the bell ring. Let's give our important information right at the end.
I've never heard a teacher in a horror film either go, that bell's for me, not you. Put everything down again. You go when I say you go. Not
I'm
with
glad.
Powell ring.
I'm glad that crosses cultures.
I'm not saying I said that when I was a supply teacher at all. Definitely.
And also before all that happens, Max von Sydow is in Iraq, digging up demon totems. So that's how the demon gets here. We watch a lot of that.
I will say though, this actually brings up an interesting thing that I don't think is actually kind of talked about in any of them. I don't think it's even talked about in The Exorcist, in that they are clearly priests of the Catholic denomination of the Judeo-Christian religion, but they are fighting what is essentially an ancient Mesopotamian god of the wind in Pazuzu. So does that mean you can use Christian doctrine on any demon? Like, because it's not explicitly stated that it's Pazuzu, but you see the whole statue.
Yeah.
There's no reason to just show the beginning if it's not Pazuzu.
Or does this come from that whole kind of common kind of religious horror kind of fantasy kind of trope where yeah, it was all the same guy all along. All the faiths just had different names for them, you know.
Yeah.
But that then, like, theoretically, you could read from the Torah.
Yeah.
And it would still dispel the demon.
That's
like, you
one.
could read from the Quran, and it would still dispel the demon.
I mean, that's what they tried to do with kind of Believer, wasn't it? And it didn't really work, you know.
Yeah, the reason why Believer didn't work is because Believer was crap.
Yeah, but I could almost admire that kind of angle they were trying to go for and completely failing to kind of, you know, execute properly. You know, it's kind of okay. This could if this was good, this might have been interesting. But...
Well,
unfortunately, it's not. Yeah,
that's one issue I kind of have in general with like exorcism movies is there is this inherent Christianity is true. Okay, go. And like, there's no one who ever says, well, what if this is a Hindu demon, guys? No, it's straight to Jesus is real and he will get rid of it unless like, are there movies that go out of their way to subvert that?
I mean, the thing that jumps to my head is I Am Legend, which part of that is that the vampires are scared. The whole thing of vampires are scared of the cross. Essentially, it's a bacterial infection, essentially, and therefore, if you kind of present, I don't know, Judaism symbols to a Jewish believer, they would be scared of that, but not of the cross. If you went to like a Buddhist and showed them Buddhist symbols in the name of the equivalent of the scared of that.
The difference here is Jesus has real magic power here in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few horror films, especially in recent years, that kind of dip into like other religions, kind of using their iconography and stuff for this kind of purpose. You know, in some way, kind of Jewish kind of folklore or like Islamic folklore, you know. There are a few out there, but yeah, as you say, Catholicism tends to be the default.
And
I suppose
I guess Insidious goes to a psychic.
I mean, but Catholicism is a religion that actually employs exorcists.
In terms of kind of the at least Western exorcism films, it's generally Christian and generally Catholic. I've yet to see a Methodist priest doing exorcism. You do have some stuff. So you'll have obviously movies from other cultures that will dip into their stuff. Something like Tumbad from India, which is an amazing film. Please watch it. Which has a kind of Hindu demon, but it's not an exorcism film. And even something like The Wailing, where you do have.
I was going to say, I mean, you can bring
the Christian and the Korean,
like shamanism and stuff and everything like that. You know, it does
where they're coexisting. In terms of other like belief systems, I would say Yu-Gi-Oh, where the Egyptian gods are the real ones. You kind of have to set that up from the things. And exorcism films, I think, because exorcism is at least as we understand it in the West, a kind of very Christian set of rituals. We're immediately going to fall back on that.
I guess for this movie, Jehovah and Yahweh came from like Mesopotamia anyway, so like it's not a big deal. And this movie specifically is about Catholicism and a priest dealing with his faith and all of that. So I don't have a problem with it here. I do have a problem in your average horror film where they're like, well, let's call a priest because like what else? It's very lazy. But yeah, she. The mom is a big Hollywood actress. She's throwing a party, or before that, Reagan is playing with the Ouija board, and she says, "Oh, I have my friend Captain Howdy," and Captain Howdy does not actually control the planchette to offend her mother, And so she's having a party, and this is the scene that always gets me. Even today, Reagan comes downstairs and just pees on the floor, and
Yeah.
it's so unsettling. It's
You're gonna
gross.
die
Yeah.
up there. Yeah.
Yeah,
I will say
I can't help but the problem with that first act now. I can't help but think of the opening Scary Movie 2 now, which does like a perfect one of their better kind of parodies because they get the cinematography just right and the performance just right and but just peeing just goes on for like 2 minutes solid.
I will say the whole Ouija board things. That this is the book and then the film. It's essentially what made it into a conduit for demonic possession. Before that, it was getting in touch with yourself, and it was using kind of the subconscious to spell out message, and everyone would join together, and everyone would subconsciously write out messages. Although
That sounds
there are numerous...
demonic within Christianity.
Yeah, but it's not drawing upon other spirits.
Yeah, it was a children's party game originally, wasn't it?
Ouija is still owned by Parker Brothers.
Yeah.
Yep. You have to get the off-brand spirit board.
Like spirit boards have always been a thing. I know because I did a brief article on this about a year ago. So in the Roman times, there was a couple that used it, and they reckoned that somebody else was going to become emperor, and they were duly executed. So there are variants in China and kind of like the dynasties back 1,000 years and stuff like that. The one that we know it. I can't remember who did it. I'll probably have to look up my article for another site, which I won't name because this is 40FM. But it was there are a number of theories about why it's called Ouija. One is that it stands for Oui and Ja from German and French, so you put those together, two yeses, Ouija.
Yes,
another is that I can't remember the name for it. It's somebody's called the mother of Ouija, Helen Augusta Peters Nosworthy, who is now known as the mother of the Ouija board, who's a spiritualist, born in 1851, and apparently she was using it and asked the spirits, not the evil spirits, because you could use it to get in touch with yourself, what should we call this? And they came back and said, call it Ouija.
They were like, I don't know, that's not very catchy.
But yeah, it wasn't
It'll
like
never
a
catch
thing
on.
it wasn't used
kids
for
are gonna
like
love it.
demonic conduits. This is the one that then like overnight
that would
it's now
be
used for demonic conduits.
That would be insane if they were like, we're gonna make something to conjure demons. That would be not a very good product.
Yeah.
And so she pees on the ground. She's getting like more and more just insane. Meanwhile, Father Karras, he's over here. He's real depressed. He's broke. His mom dies. He can't really help take care of her. He's having a bad time. He's questioning his faith in God. And then, some of the bad things for Reagan, the bed's bouncing all around. That's where my wife heard me be wrong. She broke her spine in the bouncing bed scene. Still, that's not a curse. That's like, that can happen to you. Let's see. Yeah, the bed bounces. She's like, says the C word. She's very evil little demonic child. So they call in the priests, and she's vomiting on them, and she's jerking off with the crucifix, and she's spinning her head around, which is still the coolest. When I hear that, there's a line from a Kanye song, Mercy. Like, that's the impact of that. It's just in random rap songs. They're talking about heads turning like Exorcist. Then finally the power of Christ compels her. And like throughout all of this, Linda Blair's makeup is getting worse and worse as her face gets like just more possessed-ish. The power of Christ compels her. And does Max von Sydow jump out of a window? I'll be honest, I didn't watch the end. I forgot
Max
the end.
von Sydow dies, and then Karras, whoever plays
Karras takes the demon into his body and then commits suicide.
There we go. Thank you for catching me up, guys.
Jason.
Have you guys ever seen like the early version of the Reagan makeup? It's kind of interesting. It took them a while to kind of get kind of the right kind of balance between kind of being still have a recognizably human and a child, but kind of that demonic side shine through.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them were kind of a lot more severe, a lot more grotesque early on, but then sometimes get that balance. So obviously she gets you have the contact lenses later on, you have the slash on the face and everything, but it's still very recognizably a child, so you need that kind of vestige of innocence, I suppose, kind of hanging around throughout.
It bloody works. It's one, it gave her a career, and two, what The Exorcist did at the box office and stuff like that is ridiculous.
So that's the last thing I wanted to touch on, is this had a four walls distribution method. And basically, so back in the day, theaters could be owned by studios. Well, that ended in the 40s. They couldn't do that anymore. But there was this new trick where they were like, okay, here's what we'll do. We're going to distribute the film directly into your theater. We get all the box office take, and you get all the concession money. And so Warner Brothers was the first major studio to release a major film that way. And they took the, like $1.9 million that it made in the first week in limited distribution. I also learned this is a movie where they learned, like, oh, we don't need to make blaxploitation films to get black people to watch movies. They'll watch anything. They learned, like, I guess that was some weird segregation mindset. Like, I don't understand, but like this movie,
different content for different audiences. Yeah, it was a very kind of old-fashioned kind of view of it.
Well, I mean, you still have in a lot of production studios you have kind of women's movies and men's movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And men won't go see a movie with a female lead in it. Oh my God, how would they? That kind of thing. Or a black person as a lead. Oh, white person are definitely not going to go to see that. It's still kind of a thing.
Well, and their thought was black people don't want to watch a movie with no black people in it. Well, it turns out anybody will watch a good movie. So, I mean, this movie was just crazy popular. It was critically mostly well received. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars. I mean, there were some more mixed, and obviously the people who thought it was demonic.
I mean, it is interesting, kind of Ebert, like a lapsed Catholic, kind of phrasing it so much, especially a man who famously didn't have much time for many horror films.
Yeah, and also, much like The Godfather, this was based off like a New York Times bestseller. It was on top of the New York Times list for like 57 weeks or something crazy. So this was basically popular movie, got to make movie, got to capitalize, and it worked. And I mean, a lot of that goes to Friedkin and the team behind the special effects and all that, more so than the source material itself, probably. But insanely good movie, huge effect on the film industry, and obviously among the best, if not the.
Yeah, I guess another example of the the writer of the source material adapting his own work and it kind of working,
Somehow,
which doesn't always happen.
Although amazingly, it happened the year before as well with The Godfather.
That's true.
I've been picky a lot. I did that one with James Earl Jones too. It's surprising.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on The Exorcist, guys?
And kind of in terms of its importance, maybe, I don't know. Sam, go for something.
Well, I think more like Tubular Bells was kind of, it had a whole like separate life almost. I mean, obviously kind of known because of this film, but it was just a massive chart hit in general. I mean, it was one of the biggest. It made Virgin Records basically. That's that single. So,
and it's something that everybody knows, even if they don't know. They don't even know what it is. They hear do and they go, "Oh, it's The Exorcist."
And you hear it twice in the film.
Yeah.
Oh, and then all the movies that spun off it, like The Omen, Amityville, like that just became a craze in the 70s after this came out.
There are some stuff that obviously got made as a result of this, but were in the runnings anyway, because obviously Amityville is based off a case that the Warrens came in and took credit for.
Based off bullshit, but yeah.
Yeah, essentially. And Jay Aston wrote the book. I can't remember where it is. I'll go and check it out because I've got it up there somewhere. It's not a good book. It's really not good.
One of their
that was
things
around the same times, but it wasn't 79.
One of their evidences was that Satan put hoof prints in the snow on a day that it did not snow, and you can check that record.
Okay, it was written from after, but the stuff was done.
The doors opened and closed, guys. Those are
Oh my
the
God.
two things doors do.
It's like Paranormal Activity. But yeah, so I think The Omen did, but The Exorcist, The Omen, and then Rosemary's Baby are part of the what's known as kind of the unholy trilogy of kind of demonic possession films and demon films. So I think The Omen might have got greenlit, but probably I think I want to say that the idea for it was already kind of in the ideas.
It's quite a different animal, really, isn't it, from The Exorcist? I'd say.
Yeah, I'm guessing it will have done something like what Star Wars did for Alien, that the idea was around, but they greenlit it as a result of The Exorcist's success, even though it wasn't a thing. And and the thing with The Exorcist now is any demonic possession movie is automatically compared to The Exorcist, even if it has nothing to do with The Exorcist. Like it could be different language, culture.
Yeah, I just want to see one demonic possession movie that just tries something different with how you physically kind of represent that happening, other than bodily kind of distortion.
Doors opening and closing, Sam.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, classic.
But then you do the thing I was arguing, or I have argued before, that essentially ghost and demon narratives are essentially becoming blurred.
Yeah.
That essentially all the manifestations are the same. The difference is the backstory and how you get rid of them.
Pretty much. Okay. Sam?
And I will say very, very quickly, the box office for The Exorcist was the biggest for a horror movie until It Chapter 1.
That's insane.
Which is nearly 45 years later. That's how well, adjusting for inflation, I think that is. That's how well it did. It was just ridiculous. Yeah. And the first, you missed this out, Jacob. The first horror movie to get the best picture nod.
Oh, there you go. I didn't even read that on. There's so much to read about this movie that I skipped over that.
Well, from one of those that got that to
the one that won.
Yeah, to the one that really smashed the awards ceiling. Yeah.
Hello, Clarice.
Yeah, so
he doesn't say.
He says good evening.
He says good morning.
Good morning, Clarice. Yeah.
No, he just says good morning.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah, he might say hello, Clarice, in Hannibal or something like that. But
I think he does in Hannibal. Yeah, it's one of those misquoted lines.
I just like saying it because it's wrong.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things like Elementary, My Dear Watson.
Yeah,
that's now become a thing that you have to include.
And Luke, I am your father.
Yeah, there is a name for it. I can't remember.
Tommy Boy.
Yeah. So we're jumping forward a decade, or just beyond a decade and a half to 1991, with Jonathan Demme's Silence of the Lambs, so adapting the Thomas Harris novel. So this is one of my, I would say it's one of my favourite films, full stop, of all time. It's definitely my top 10, has been for a while. And in addition, I'd say I chose to choose to win, but I really, really love both Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs as books as well. And they're both two of the best things I've read. I just love Tom Harris's writing style. And this is just a really, really killer kind of adaptation of that work for me. So,
by the way, I was watching this and Red Dragon at an inappropriately young age, but I would say especially Red Dragon.
Yeah. I mean, this wasn't the first adaptation of a Hannibal Lecter story. We had Michael Mann doing Manhunter, which was the first adaptation of Red Dragon before Brett Ratner bizarrely decided to do it again 20 years later. So this is based on the second book featuring Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter. And it's kind of a very tropey kind of thing now. But it's one of the first films or stories in general to do it. Basically to catch a meticulous and depraved serial killer, the FBI must use the mind of another meticulous and depraved serial killer. So it's using the whole enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. So famously, Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter is one of the shortest kind of screen times for a best leading actor kind of Oscar winner. I think it's only David Niven who was on screen for less time, and winning best lead actor at the Oscars. But he really, a bit like as we talked about with Darth Vader the other week, he really does kind of, even when he's not on screen, his presence is felt. It's all he's kind of driving everything. I mean, he's basically leaving this trail of breadcrumbs for Clarice Starling to kind of follow, and doling out information just when he wants to, just enough to kind of agonize her and get her on the right track, but not quite, put everything together. And so she has to ask him for more help, essentially. What I do love about this, I mean, just Thomas Harris is famously, he's quite reclusive. He doesn't really do interviews. I mean, he
Hardly
hasn't
writes
written
any
many
books.
Should have gotten him
so
on this episode.
Yeah. So
have you read? The only one I haven't read is the first one he did, which was Black Sunday, I think it was. Have you read Carrie Mora that came out sort of 7 or 8 years ago?
I was looking him up earlier on, and I was thinking it does sound interesting. I might give it a go, but no.
It's not the greatest execution in the world.
I just learned he went to my college's rival. Gross. I hate him now.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, Carrie Moore is not the greatest execution in the world. Stick to silence.
Yeah. But yeah, I've read his Hannibal books, and they're all kind of work in different ways. I know the book Hannibal is particularly divisive. By overall, I really like. Not wild about the ending, but generally it's got still got some really memorable kind of moments and characters in it. But in the forward to like a new edition of Red Dragon that was published turn of the century, he admitted that Hannibal kind of had this kind of sinister control over him. He didn't feel like he was right. He was deciding what the character was doing. Bucky, which was almost like, kind of, he got to a scene with Hannibal. It's like I had no control over it. He was influencing me. I couldn't stop him. What he was about to do. So, and he said it's kind of so rare for like a creator to be scared of one of their own kind of something they've dreamt up. But he said that was the case with Hannibal. And he said, because he hates fame as well, he hates kind of being in the public eye. I mean, that's why he's such a recluse. But he said, I found and find the scrutiny of Dr. Lecter uncomfortable and intrusive, and that I did not know that. So this obviously after this was prior to writing Hannibal. He said, I did not know that Dr. Lecter would return, but I had a horrible feeling that he would. So,
he does that.
Yeah, I mean, both kind of, well, all the big screen versions of kind of Lecter have been kind of slightly different takes, but kind of they've got stuff in common as well. So you had Brian Cox in Manhunter, then you had Anthony Hopkins 3 times, and then obviously you've had Mads Mikkelsen, the TV show since.
Who was it in Hannibal Rising that died?
Gaspar Ulliel, yes.
Yeah.
Who doesn't get a lot of good praise, but I thought he did a decent job. I mean, he was only compared, obviously, negatively to Anthony Hopkins, but I thought he was decent.
I mean, you're always going to get compared to Anthony Hopkins. Let's be fair.
What I really love about kind of this film is kind of, I mean, this is where I get to kind of the debate about is it horror or not? Yeah, it's got some horrible stuff in it, horrible thematic stuff, but it's kind of, is it more of kind of a
crime,
like a thriller? Like a crime thriller. Has it got more in common with like true crime stuff? I mean, like, would you say like Zodiac is a horror film? I mean, just because it's adapting a real story, but with like some horrific kind of imagery in it. It's an interesting debate to have.
What's your
horror
defense that it is a horror film?
I mean, it's I suppose it's still the feeling it kind of gives you, kind of the atmosphere of it, and how it makes you kind of, it gives like an almost like visceral kind of reaction to some of the stuff, and just some classic kind of horror tricks of kind of letting your imagination do the work. I mean, famously, when Clarice first visits Hannibal in the asylum, and she meets with Dr. Chilton, and he's giving her the lowdown about what to do and what not to do. And as a warning, he passes her a photo of what Hannibal did to the last nurse who got close to him. And obviously, we never see the picture, but it's like kind of Clarice's like reaction. And Dr. Chilton said it took us 2 days to reset her jaw and just about save one of her eyes.
Yeah, his pulse never got above 85.
Yeah,
even when he ate her tongue.
Yeah. I mean, I think point of view in general is kind of really interesting in this film. It's it's not. I wouldn't say it's kind of a murder mystery because we know who the killer is. You know, it's like it's about waiting for Clarice and the FBI to kind of catch up. You know, with kind of what's going on. But so it's her story. You know, we're in kind of from her point of view and her experiences. And then so often, like the camera's like at her eye level. You know, it's there's a great shot earlier on where she's at Quantico. You know, and getting it the lift up. You know, to you know, see Jack Crawford, and you know, she's like, I mean, Jodie Foster's tiny, you know, and she's just in this packed into this lift full of men who are comically large compared to her, you know, and obviously everyone, you know, being, you know, woman in a man's world and all that. Obviously, and I've had like a lot of stories like that since, but I think a lot of people have said we wouldn't have like Dana Scully, you know, without Clarice Starling, you know, it's
yeah, on
and,
that very quickly, I was going to say that I put that in my write-up for this on the 50 films list, that apparently Jodie Foster's portrayal was a direct influence on how they made Scully. And then after X-Files came out, there was a significant rise in the amount of women getting into criminology and science and all the stuff that kind of X-Files stuff was as a direct result of seeing. It's sometimes known as the Scully effect. It's not officially proven, but it's kind of near enough that we knew it was a trend kind of thing.
Yeah, it's credible, isn't it? Yeah.
So if I said, if nothing else is a legacy of Silence of the Lambs, I think that has had, you can see the genuine influence on people's lives in the real world and the way it's affected careers and stuff like that. So, you know, in terms of importance and influence.
And pretty much every like male character she encounters like throughout the film is kind of putting it down in some way, you know, different kind of techniques, you know, like Crawford, you know, he's a nice guy, really. He's a mentor figure, he's supportive to an extent, but he's also kind of using her for his own ends, and there's points where like he will put it down in public, you know, save face, you know, kind of, I think he makes an excuse for it one time, saying, you know, I think where he kind of basically says, "Oh, women should leave the room because we're about to watch some, you know, we're about to see something gruesome," you know, and he kind of says to her afterwards, you know, "Oh, you know, I had to do that. I had to show my authority," and she's like, "Yeah, sir, but you know, people look to you. You know, you need to set an example," and it kind of, she puts him back in his place, which is a nice little moment. So you got Dr. Chilton, you know, as a very old-fashioned kind of lech, basically, you know, just kind of undressing her with his eyes, and Hannibal, who kind of seem he's fascinated by her, you know, but he's trying to obviously kind of prove superiority and kind of go back to his old career, I suppose. You know, diagnose her, you know, kind of really get under her skin, you know, to kind of prove his kind of superiority. But I think he's more interested in kind of her coming on than a lot of people have tried to do the same thing with her, so which is probably why she gets more information out of him than most people would.
Well, and he's not a good guy, but also I don't think that dude would literally throw semen at a male investigator.
No. Yeah. I mean,
multiple MIGs.
He drives that guy to suicide straight afterwards because he famously hates rude people. He hates kind of
that's quite rude. Throwing your semen.
I mean, that's, I will say that's one of the things that I really do like about Lecter as a character and find interesting and think differentiates him from a lot of other, I'm going to say, horror killers. In that he doesn't just kill people, he doesn't just eat people. You got the Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter. It's like he will kill and eat people that he finds offensive or rude or get in his way. If you're completely nice and courteous, he has not the slightest interest in.
And he's classy about it, you know. I mean, except for that nurse, but other than that,
Yeah. And if you have to, if you have to kill someone, you know, you want to kind of, you know, there's that phrase, butchery, like nose to tail. You know, he will use everything edible from a body. He doesn't get to waste, does it?
Yeah, but he's somebody that's it's not like automatic, just like mass slaughter, like a kind of Michael Myers or Jason or something like that. He is an individual, and he's curious, and he likes kind of art and culture and things like that. So it's kind of thing where if he consumes
it, if you will.
Like it's the kind of thing where if he needs a car right now, He's
Yeah.
got no qualms about killing the person driving it to get it.
Yeah.
If he's
Yeah.
completely fine and he needs his car fixed and you're the mechanic, he's not going to kill you. Like, he'll actually be very kind and thank you for doing me a service. You know, he's not going to kill everybody in his way. He's going to live a normal life.
Meanwhile,
And this is
Buffalo
just
Bill is rude, and somebody helps him with
Yeah.
his furniture, and
I
classless.
mean, I think Roger Ebert said in one of his pieces about the film that so like Hannibal Lecter, he'd be a great dinner party guest as long as he didn't eat you. He'd be
Yeah.
great company.
Yeah. I mean, I've looked at recently in other avenues, people that have written kind of serial killer stuff and that kind of thing. And one of their things is that they're kind of the bad guys quite often are just, we just kill people and that's fun. Do. And it's like, that's not what makes an interesting character. As soon as you do that, I lose all interest. And I'm like, please add something else. Like, they really like peaches, or just something else to add to their character. And that's why I think Hannibal is good. And apparently from a kind of psychopath
Don't
point
bring
of view,
Army Hammer into this.
apparently from a psychopath point of view, he's very unusual. That he doesn't fit a lot of the stereotypes, and he's kind of a amalgam.
They say he's they call him a pure. I mean, I think this from the book. They call him a pure. They say sociopath in the book, and they say psychopath in the film. But I think in the book it was they call him pure sociopath because they don't know what else to call him.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, it's just a really interesting character that I would agree with Ebert. It'd be like, again, if you don't offend him or get in his way, he's perfectly fine. And that's kind of the binary that he can flip. And there's always that in him.
And it's that contrast between him and Buffalo Bill. It's like him, everything is kind of calculated and elegant and kind of to the point, not wasteful. Buffalo Bill's like he's a blunt instrument, you know. He's just he will, you know, he's careful, he plans stuff out, but equally he makes mistakes, and it's almost that kind of Hannibal's kind of almost resenting. It's like, if this was me, I'd be doing so much better than this. So I'm gonna, but the FBI still need my help, so I'm gonna give him some kind of elusive hints here and there.
But by the way, Kieran, I know you don't like the term because you think it's a way to elevate horror, but because of the way it does actually utilize it's a psychological thriller. I mean, if anything is, it's this.
What thrillers aren't psychological in some way?
I think it's definitely on that line. I mean, if you go to the books, arguably, kind of the imagery is even more horrific. You know, they kind of have to dial back on that a bit more with the films, kind of, you know, to be releasable, but it kind of it retains some of its power because of that, you know, because it's making your mind work, and your mind's your own worst enemy, kind of think up the worst kind of scenarios and everything. This was an interesting one for Anthony Hopkins, though, because he'd been essentially trying and failing to break into Hollywood for years. He was obviously a big star of the British stage, and it was in a fair few kind of period dramas kind of over here as well. But I think at this point, probably his most recognizable role in Hollywood would have been Elephant Man.
I think Magic is just a little bit too far back.
He got quite. I think he got quite stressed when Jonathan Demme kind of essentially cast him for this role on the back of Elephant Man. He said, "But Dr. Treves was a good man," and I think Jonathan Demme replied something like, "Well, so is Hannibal, or he thinks he is."
Yeah, he was also in The Bounty from 1984, which I think is one of the things that Demme saw Hopkins in and therefore cast him. And apparently Hopkins was really kind of scared because Jodie Foster had just won the Oscar like 2 years beforehand. It was like, oh my God, I've got to act alongside of this. It's like, very, very worried about it. And apparently they never spoke. Apparently they never spoke.
They kept that animosity and that separation in the film. Again, is really interesting because they're never obviously they're in the same frame, but they're not quite in the same space. There's always something between them, obviously, because the way the plot works. So, you know, various barriers. You know, so either like a glass pane of the cell or bars of the prison cell, and they brush fingers lightly once in the whole film. And I love the scenes of the asylum where there's always a reflection of one of them, so you're always seeing both of them at the same time. It's a really clever kind of trick of cinematography. You know, you're always seeing the other face kind of distorted in the glass while the other's talking. So
And there's the scene with in the where he's in the cage in the middle, and Jodie
Yeah,
Foster's
yeah,
giving
yeah,
her backstory that they'd
yeah,
cast a young Clarice, that they were going to do a whole flashback scene too.
yeah, yeah,
And Jodie Foster gives this thing, and they've got the two cameras set up on each other like that because
yeah,
it's a direct
yeah,
address.
yeah,
And apparently that was going on, and everybody hushed. And
yeah,
they keep going, and apparently somewhere there's a massive clang of something in the background. Everyone just looks around like,
yeah,
and they keep going, you know, not breaking character. Go cut, and Foster just goes,
yeah,
"Who the f- was that doing that?" And apparently after
yeah,
this, like Demi kind of looked at this and went, "There is no way I can do this flashback. There's no way I can be
no,
cruel enough to cut away from
no,
these two performances going on. I'm
mm,
not doing it." So there's you
yeah,
see kind of documentaries, and there's somebody who's like, "Yeah, I was casting young Clarice Starling. They never shot anything with me because the normal Clarice was too damn good. They didn't want to lose her."
yeah. I mean, you see her kind of very briefly, don't you, like the young actress? But the way they did the flashbacks essentially is putting, as you say, putting Jodie Foster in the past space, you know, and kind of it's like her future, you know, sorry, her present self and her past self kind of blend into one, which is kind of works real well, kind of dramatically. Um, Anthony Hopkins apparently based his Hannibal Lecter voice as a combination between Truman Capote and Katharine Hepburn, which I just love.
Interesting.
That's it's just such a theatrical actor way of doing like a unique voice, you know. I mean, and
Well,
yeah,
the
I wouldn't
Welsh
say
accent wasn't going to work, would it?
no, but that's the problem. It's like because he doesn't do many films where he's playing American. He's,
But
and I would
Hannibal
say
isn't American.
no, well, no, but okay, culturally American. I mean, he's been there for a while. He's affected that voice, hasn't he? Yeah,
I was
I
going to
know, I
say
know he's
they didn't give him a sixth finger either.
no, or maroon eyes.
No.
But yeah, yes, so he's affected that obviously that voice, you know, being part of high society in Baltimore, you know. But the voice does waver a few times, which may have been intentional on Hopkins' part. Maybe he's thinking, well, he is from somewhere else. Maybe his voice is from everywhere. I mean, but you know, it's kind of interesting. I mean, the AFI kind of that they chose Clarice Starling as the sixth greatest movie hero out of 50 in the kind of to date, and Hannibal Lecter as the number one greatest movie villains. These are obviously American films, you know, just it's not nothing, you know. And I wouldn't, I struggle to disagree, really. I mean, it's very much her film, and you know, kind of her experience, and you know, obviously we're in her shoes, you know, throughout, and he's just this like force, kind of this malevolent force, just on the periphery for most of it, but always kind of worming his way into her mind and everything. Again, go back to the use of point of view. I mean, one of the greatest kind of juxtaposed kind of edited scenes, you know, with you know, the FBI thinking they found Buffalo Bill's, you know, house, and you know, they're preparing a raid, and they burst, and at the same time, Clarice doing her own investigation, and the FBI burst into an empty house, and then the door, Buffalo Bill opened the door to Clarice on her own. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
It's a magic
piece
trick,
of
I
piece
think
of
I heard
build up.
somebody
Yeah,
describe it as.
yeah. I think I've probably got to mention Buffalo Bill really, because I think
Yes.
to to modernise, yeah, it's probably seen as a bit of an offensive stereotype. Could be worse, but equally, you know, it doesn't help. You know, you got so many kind of um, characters, you know, characters who don't fit into like no kind of mainstream kind of gender ideals. You know, I mean, I think he Lexus says, you know, he claims Billy's not a real transsexual, which okay, that's a
But
bit
he
of a
thinks he is, yeah.
yeah, but he thinks he is, yeah. And I think this got a lot of pushback at the time of, you know, from you know, LGBT kind of groups, you know, saying, oh, yet another kind of psychopath, you know, who's looking to change his gender identity. You know, it's
To be fair, he is
yeah,
the bad guy saying that. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
you could always look at Buffalo Bill as, you know, this is a product of the system when you have a repressed person
yeah,
who has no
yeah,
healthy outlet.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, to be fair to Thomas Harris, in the book, there's like a support group that I think Clarice kind of talks to at one point. Like a trans kind of support group, and they kind of they're basically kind of the more positive kind of characters in that group. And they're kind of when they realise that he's this character's probably done inquired about gender reassignment. She kind of that's one of the avenues she goes down, kind of talks to people from that community. Um, and I think they could have possibly done with exploring that aspect a little bit more, but but as you say, he's a bad guy, and he's trying to make a woman's suit.
Yeah,
Literally.
I think it's one of those things that, again, we are now kind of 30 odd years in the future,
Yeah,
as well. And I know there was pushback from it at the time, but I'm not a kind of queer film historian. I don't know how much representation there was of the trans community in those films anyway. So
yeah,
even the line from Hannibal going, he's not a real transsexual, but he thinks he is,
yeah,
might have actually been them going, we're making positive. It might have been like them genuinely not understanding the
yeah,
lash that they were going to get, and it not being a
yeah,
demonizing thing. And from
yeah,
our point of view now, we're
yeah,
going to say this
yeah,
is not good, but we're 30 years into the future,
exactly.
with all the
Yeah,
progress we've had.
He's not
yeah,
one of the good ones, I guess.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But his kind of playing certain lines, Ted Levine's kind of playing like, it rubs the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again.
It does
Yeah.
whatever it's told.
Which
Yeah.
my favorite parody of that is Cartman plays it in South Park with his doll.
Yeah.
And he has Bebe come over to play Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. Oh God.
I mean, you can
So-
tell the impact of this when at the Oscars,
Yeah.
it opens because Billy Crystal is the host, and it came out nearly a year beforehand because it was released on Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And it opens with
Lovely
Billy
Valentine's Day movie, by the way.
Well, it was kind of open because he was Demi and the producer were like, well, everyone's going to see Valentine's Day movies on Valentine's Day. What about everybody else? And he went, it's actually a perfect date movie because you can have the girl clinging onto the guy's arm, and you can do it like that.
And that's become a bit of a common release strategy these days. Usually, the only things that release on Valentine's Day are rom-coms and horror films. You usually get a couple of each, don't you?
Yeah, with the Oscars, it's Billy Crystal who's the host, and he's introduced by being wheeled in, strapped to a chair with Lecter's mask on, and he takes it off, walks into the crowd, finds Anthony Hopkins, and goes, "I'm thinking of having my friends over for dinner later. Would you care to join me?"
One thing that I like that Hannibal doesn't do, but I mean, I enjoy the theme in Red Dragon and this is metamorphosis as like a reason for the bad guy. It would be, I guess, Gary Oldman went through metamorphosis for that, but that's an interesting parallel that one guy wants to become the devil, the red dragon of Revelation, and this guy's like, I want to become a woman.
And obviously the whole butterfly motif and everything.
Death Moth. Come on, Sam.
Yes.
Death Head.
Well,
whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's on Hannibal. I mean he asks, "Was it a butterfly?" when they find something in the body's mouth. Yeah.
The world's best cold reader.
Yeah. So this was the obviously the film that really kind of broke through in terms of awards recognition, I would argue, for horror films, if considering it a horror film. So it's still only one of three movies to win the top five, the big five Oscars, along with It Happened One Night and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I would say thoroughly deserved, and hasn't really been repeated since. I mean, I don't think even there's a nice horror film that's kind of obviously Get Out got a few nominations, didn't it? And
I mean,
screenplay win, but
there's you could probably have some like arguments, something like Shape of Water. It's got like a fantastical monster movie, obviously drawing on Creature from the Black Lagoon. But in terms of horror,
but in terms of like genre films, Lord of the Rings pretty much got everything except any acting kind of
Yeah.
recognition, you know. So that's what's missing. I mean, that's one of
And
the criticisms, isn't it, about
yeah.
kind of if horror films are going to be nominated, it's going to be for the technical categories, you know, screenplay
What?
if it's a particular original idea at a
Yeah.
push, but generally your
And
actors, and especially female actors, don't
yeah.
tend to
And
get the recognition
everything
they
everywhere
deserve.
all at once in terms of genre films
Yeah,
missed out because
yeah,
Keiko Kwan was in supporting actor
yeah,
rather than
yeah,
in actor. If it'd gone for actor and had beat Brendan Fraser, it would have got the big five, I believe.
yeah.
But because it was in supporting, it doesn't count.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. And this one basically they should have probably left it at the one, but they didn't. You know, it's spawned a franchise, so diminishing returns.
With
Though I
prequels.
think, as I said, they've all kind of got their moments. I don't think Hannibal. I'd say is solid-ish. You know, it's kind of mid tier kind of Ridley Scott for me. You know, I mean, obviously, Jeff Demme didn't come back. Jodie Foster didn't come back. Anthony Hopkins did, but again, this is an issue of the book. It's like you don't want Hannibal on screen for too long because it works better in kind of small doses. Yeah, but because he's like essentially like the second lead,
The main character. Yeah.
in the second one. Yeah,
And it's got man-eating pigs. You can't dislike a movie with
Otherwise
man-eating
known as
pigs.
pigs.
yeah. I mean, I like the Mason Verger stuff. I mean, I like that in the Hannibal book as well. I think he's a good character. So, where Hannibal
I will say,
convinced him to cut off his own face, and looking back on it, he says, "Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time."
yeah, I will say that all 5 Hannibal Lecter movies are ranked on the film magazine
Yeah,
by
yeah,
guest.
mm,
Looking down,
yeah,
Libby
yeah,
Briggs, and this was
yeah,
from 2021. So
yeah, yeah. I would say obviously South is fantastic. Manhunter's good. Um, Hannibal's got its moments. Red Dragon's all right, and yeah,
I
let's
like
say
Red Dragon.
Let's say that Hannibal Rising the better.
yeah, I will say I find it quite funny when it was Red 2 that came out because you had Anthony Hopkins and Brian Cox in the movie together, and it's like,
Yeah,
wow, we've got 2 Hannibal Lecters
yeah.
facing off against each other. It's like, oh, it's like everything you ever wanted come true, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think this got some of the best kind of drawn out kind of character dialogue kind of scenes. You know, these kind of sparring matches. You know, like each character trying to work the other one out, or trying to unsettle the other, or find a chink in the armor. I think that kind of that's why it's going to be remembered. It's like these 2 performances, but also Demi was a really good director. I think it's very very well put together film. The script's a very good kind of adaptation of Harris's work, and I think it's really really effective as a whole. And yet another movie of a protege of Roger Corman, putting him in there for a cameo. He plays the head of the FBI in this one.
Yeah. That you kind of skip past him and go, hang on.
Yeah. He's even in the opening credits this one. I think normally he's just like he's like an uncredited cameo, or like he's maybe in like the very end credits. But no, he's like 10th build or something in the opening credits.
That's insane.
Roger Corman, of course he would be.
Yeah, and for me, probably Howard Shaw's best score after The Lord of the Rings. So
Yep, there's an argument for that, definitely. To be honest, I can't think of anything else.
yeah,
off the top of my head.
So if there's anything else you want to say with Silence of the Lambs, but if you somehow haven't seen it, give yourself a treat. It's great.
Yeah, and be aware, if you've only seen the series Hannibal takes the books and does its own mythology with them.
So they didn't for a variety of complex rights reasons, they couldn't adapt Silence of the Lambs again. So they did a series of kind of more or less original content, kind of using kind of references like in backstory of the books, and then they readapted Hannibal and readapted Red Dragon third. So they swapped the order around.
Yeah. And obviously a lot of stuff doesn't make sense because obviously Will Graham, who's only in Red Dragon, is not in the Hannibal book but they're using
No.
the Hannibal storyline and stuff like that. But I will say on all of them, I will say Mads Mikkelsen is a very solid second place Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. I would say
He's
this is
very
always
good.
It's always going to be the definitive Harris adaptation from me, but the series, I think the time it gives those two characters really pays dividends. So it's definitely second. Yeah, it's well worth checking out on Hannibal series.
With Thorin from The Hobbit as
as
Francis Dolarhyde.
Dolarhyde,
What?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's weird. It's bloody great. It's Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
That's the most British thing I've ever seen said. I am losing the ability to spray my worms correctly, so we should probably move on.
Yeah, Kieran, what did you pick? Another exciting American-made film, or?
Yeah, I went overseas because it's kind of half my PhD, or a lot of it is kind of slightly more futuristic ghost adaptations. So
Okay,
that's what I went to.
By the way, is this title Ring because they're being rang on the phone? what is the reason for this title?
Well, there's literally a ring on the screen, isn't there?
I don't think so. There is in Ring in this version, and even if it is, that's not actually why the book is called
I didn't
Ring.
see the ring in this one on the screen. I don't remember it, at least.
No,
I probably think it's the American remake, aren't I?
Yes, they put it in for the American remake. So I'm
because
doing
we are
Ring,
stupid.
1998. There's a weird thing that the books do. Okay, and essentially, it's to do with the shape of a virus. That Sadako essentially becomes a biological virus, and it's shaped like a ring. Hence why, in 1995, the first adaptation of Ring comes out. I think it's a Korean TV series called The Ring Virus. And this goes more in when you get to Spiral and Loop, which are the sequels. And it goes off on a weird way. By the time you get to Loop, I essentially think that he had a novel just trunked, that somebody went, can you just change that very slightly to make that Sadako, and we can release that as the third one? He goes, yeah, go for it.
And can you make the title something
weird.
circular?
Yeah, I mean, it all works for his idea, but essentially where it goes is not a ghost thriller movie. It goes completely sci-fi, essentially. But yeah, so the reason for the reason it's called Ring is to do with a plotline that gets developed more and more as you go through the later books. I've only read the first three. He did a series of collected stories called is it Sadako or Zero? No, it's he did one called Sadako, then he did one called S, and there's been another one. One's a collected stories, and there's been another two novels that carry on the storyline. I've only got the first three, and it was kind of almost like the original trilogy. And the reason I got those, the only ones I could find translated when I bought them. So for quick, if somehow you've missed Ring / The Ring, and I will be referencing the book because I can.
Because it's you.
Yeah, and there are differences that are made that are actually very interesting in terms of the creation of the film itself. It is the story of a journalist investigator that I'm now going to have to grab the names of because I can't
Reiko or
remember.
Reiko.
Yeah, they're very slightly different to the book as well. Reiko Asakawa, who is investigating. She's a journalist, and she's investigating a series of deaths, which are linked to a kind of new urban legend that there's a cursed videotape, and if you watch it, you see a load of weird stuff on the screen, followed by somebody calling you over the phone, and in 7 days you die. And it turns out that a relation to her, I think her niece, I think it is, has mysteriously died. Her parents find her kind of locked in a cupboard, like a look of terror kind of frozen on her face, and the girl's friends say that she watched the videotape. So Reiko Asakawa then goes back to where they apparently watched it, finds the videotape, and sees it, and then gets a phone call. So she goes, oh God, this might actually be real. I have 7 days to find out what happened, otherwise I die.
By the
she
way,
brings in
one of the great things about this is that the fact that it's a VHS and that there's pan and scan involved does matter.
Yeah. She brings in her ex-husband, Ryuji, played by Hiroyuki Sanada, who's now a Hollywood legend and has an Emmy. Is it Emmy or Golden Globe? I can't
Emmy.
remember.
Yeah,
Emmy,
yeah,
yeah.
that's an
But
Emmy. Yeah. First Japanese actor to get an Emmy, I think. Yeah.
probably first non native English speaker probably to get an Emmy at this point. Brings him in probably what he's most well known for a number of years. I mean, he did stuff like Last Samurai, and that's about it until kind of about 5-10 years ago, where they decided we should bring him in again. And between the two of them, he was a university professor with a little bit of sixth sense in this one. And between the two of them, they go and track down the kind of origins of the videotape to try and work out a way how to stop it. And spoilers, no spoilers, it turns out that it's all being done by the vengeful spirit of Sadako Yamamura, who is a girl whose mother was accused of cheating when trying to prove she was a psychic. And the mother gets unfairly dealt with. She gets essentially killed and shoved down a well, because that's what happens. You know, people do get killed and shoved down wells, and so
Every day.
you know, throughout history, it's going to have happened. And
maybe it's a Japan specific thing. I don't know.
This is her taking a result. Well, here's the thing. Okay, no.
That seems like a bad way to punish everybody because you're like destroying the drinking water.
Well, the history of Ring Ring is inspired by a number of things, and one of them is a story, a folk story of somebody called Okiku, and the 10 plates or dishes, and there are variations on this. So I'll give the rough variation. It's that there's a woman called Okiku who sometimes a servant, sometimes married to a rich gentleman, who sometimes has an ex-wife in the picture as well. But what is normally throughout there is a series of, it's normally 10 plates or dishes, and one or all of them get broken / stolen / missing, and for whatever reason she either gets blamed or it was her, and as punishment she gets killed and thrown down a well, and she comes back as vengeance. Who was it did the Great Wave? Because Hokusai, yes. He was going to do a series of 100 prints based off traditional folk stories, and one of them does depict Okiku coming out of a well, and this was in like the 1800s. And hilariously enough, years later, they found there was a plague or contaminant somewhere in Japan, and it turned out to be from a virus near a well, and they called it the Okiku bug, which is quite funny because that then comes into the thing for Sadako later on. So you have that folk element in there. You also have traditional kaidan or kwaidan, which just means general ghost story, hence the 1964 film Kwaidan, which is also on our list. Please check it out. It's very long, it has to be said, but it's like 4 films that are all like
it's also an anthology. Anthologies never seem as long once you're in them because you can just
to be honest, you can watch them as 4 films.
You can watch them in chunks.
It's really nicely done. But
I mean, a lot of these Japanese kind of films from this era, that's what they end up doing. They take like traditional folklore kind of legends and kind of put them through like the prism of like modern technology, don't they?
So Sadako is specifically drawing on a type of ghost story called an onryo, who is a avenging female ghost, normally with long black hair. Quite often, the image of Sadako is with the one eye showing. This is apparently, according to scholars, specifically, I'm going to use the term yanal, I believe is correct, which is the opposite of phallic imagery as well. And they will seek vengeance. And apparently, back in the day, this was a kind of you could swing it both ways for feminism or not. It could either be, well, don't kill women because they'll come back and kill you. But if you're on the patriarchy side, you can go, this is exactly why we need to kill the women, because they'll try and kill us. So there was always the swings and roundabouts back in the day. And obviously, remember, this is drawing on traditions from 100 years ago. The thing with Ring is that it then goes, right, let's take that and let's shove modern technology into it. And it shoves it in a thing of VHS tapes. Not only that, but it also shoves in the phone as well. Not only this, it is also updating and other scholars, including myself. But then when I also went to the M.R. James convention kind of symposium in April, they were drawing this as well. The idea of essentially a spirit kind of giving you a deadline, and you would die by this deadline if you don't somehow stop the curse. This is a idea that M.R. James wrote in a story called Casting the Runes, which got made into a 1955 film called Night of the Demon, which, Sam, I know you've seen, I'm fairly sure,
Yep.
because that was on our big list that might have eventually gone into the 50 films list, which didn't make the cut as well. That's a very influential film. Jacques Tourneur, isn't it? I believe.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So there are lots and lots of influences going into Ring. It's an amazing film anyway. It's very, very simple. And that's what I like about it. There's not many crazy bits of camera work. It's a lot of it is very static. And it's just kind of draw everything out, keep it slow, keep it burning.
And yeah, it's very much a slow burn, isn't it? I mean, if what you know of it, the image, you know, of Sadako crawling out the TV and stuff, that's like such a small part of this film, you know.
And not in the book.
Yeah.
It's not described in the book. I think he gets a feeling that something's
Kieran, it's
happening with
on the
VHS.
TV.
he gets a feeling that there's something wrong with the TV, and he looks in the mirror and he actually sees himself like horribly aged, like 100 years later in the mirror at one point. But essentially, yeah. They have to make changes to this, so for the film version. So Reiko is actually a male character in the book, who I can't remember the name of. Obviously, I could look it up now, but I think he just calls him Asakawa. Ryuji is an old friend of his that he knew from high school, university, stuff like that. And there's weird stuff with that you can't include. So in this, Ryuji is just like the former husband who's kind of trying to do his own thing university-wise. In here, in the book, he's very much like a psychopath, sociopath kind of, I'm going to do anything, live a moment. And he kind of watches the tape because, sorry, if I die, I die. Let's live kind of thing. There are implications. Well, Suzuki goes, like, the main character never knew whether Ryuji was telling the truth. But in the book, Ryuji tells a story that, like, years and years ago, he essentially went out one night bored and raped a woman and came back again. Obviously, you can't include that in the film. There's other weird things, like in the book, Sadako is described as a hermaphrodite. You're not going to include that in the film. There are things that are changed that you're not going to include. One of the things that's also not included is what sets up for later on, in that he eventually discovers the whole thing of copying the videotape and passing it on is specifically going back to viral reproductions and passing forward over and over and over. Hence, it's the Ring virus. And there's things that come in this film that aren't in the book. So there are bits here. But there's an awful lot more of Ryuji having sixth sense in this, and seeing the flash when it comes onto the arm and things like that. And stuff like that don't get translated to the American version because of the localization, which is really weird. Because some stuff, like Ghost Girls crawling out of a TV and all that stuff, is fine. And in the American version, they add in the thing with the horse, which is not in any of the other versions. But in the American, the Gore Verbinski version, one of the reasons why I don't like that version as much is they give Sadako or Samara Morgan in that film, they give her a voice. Now, the reason I don't like that is because, you know me, child actors 99% of the time are not going to sound great. When you have to make a child actor do something sinister, that's even more borderline. You're heading for disaster and it's going to sound cheesy. The reason they have to do that is the idea was, well, in this version of the film, a lot of the information is presented by kind of sixth sense, kind of holding onto an arm and getting flashes. The thinking was that the Japanese audiences and Japanese people are more open to superstition and things like that the American audiences are more closed off to. So we're going to have to find a more scientific, rational way to give this exposition. So they give the videotapes. In order to do that, to get the information, you now have to make Samara talk. And I don't like that because in the original, she was just complete wrath, complete fury for no reason other than the world's been crap to me. I am going to destroy the world and burn it down, essentially, through my evil biological tech ghost horror ways. In this one, in the remake, it makes her a spiteful little girl. Also, her crawling out the TV is too fast. I hate it.
One thing in Ring that I noticed is that she's dry whenever she crawls out of the TV. I don't remember the American version, but in Scary Movie, she's wet because she's coming out of a well, and so that's what
Dripping wet, yeah.
the comedy scene comes from.
Yeah,
but I was struck by that she wasn't wet.
Yeah, and when her specific kind of movements that people have kind of laughed at now, that is specifically drawing on the actress's history in kabuki theater, and the kind of exaggerated moves from that. That and in the backstory for Samara Sadako. Sadako.
Forget it
also-
exists, Kieran.
Yeah, Sadako also was trained in kabuki theater.
Yeah.
So it actually draws on the backstory to the character originally. So it's a hell of a good film, like ridiculously good anyway. But why it's on the list is the fact that this came out and then suddenly J horror was a thing, which I despise as a term because it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Like, what does J horror mean?
Japanese horror.
Yes, but when somebody says J horror, they think of long-haired Asian ghost girls.
We think
What
of
they don't
a
think of is
specific
Tetsuo.
early 2000s aesthetic, probably.
Yeah, they don't think of Tetsuo the Iron Man, which is J horror. They don't think of Tokyo Gore Police, which is J horror. They don't think of any of these films, and a lot of them that will add to the list. You see the list, and they'll add things like Shutter, which is Thai. They'll add things like The Eye, which is from Taiwan/Hong Kong. Audition is added to the list, which has a Japanese character with long black hair, but has no supernatural thing involved and is more bordering on kind of surrealist, eventually torture kind of thing. Has no relation, even though Audition was greenlit as a result of Ring. So the term J horror in terms of this kind of ghost girl aesthetic means nothing.
It's a branding thing, isn't it? Like an easy categorization thing,
Young adult.
But what did happen as a result of this is, one, the American markets went, we can make our own versions, and two, everybody in Asia went, let's do our own vaguely tangential versions because the Americans don't know one country from another, and we can jump on the bandwagon. So you even get remakes of things like Nang Nak from Thailand in 2003, which was a box office smash at the time. This was a traditional ghost story that had been made like 4 or 5 times beforehand. This was the latest blockbuster version that got made in 2003 that also has Ghost Girl, which does Ghost Girl stuff, which is based on a folk story. Can you see the resemblance here? We did Shutter many years ago on this podcast, and there is a shot where in one of the apartments, about 2/3 of the way through the film, there is a TV static on in the background. And they asked the directors, was that a reference to Ring? And they went, not initially, but when we realized it was there, we left it in because of Ring. So it was on their minds, even if they were making Shutter, which again got the remake treatment. Even something like Dark Water, which is based on Standing Water, I believe, from same author, Koji Suzuki, his anthology. I've got over there and I can't bother to reach out and find it. Kind of, yes, it's a ghost girl, but it's like a 8-year-old ghost. Like it's kind of not like long-haired ghost girl, like that kind of thing. So it starts off this whole craze, which hilariously enough, a lot of the films have nothing to do with the aesthetic or are not from the same thing. But pretty much the entirety of kind of Asia, China, Hong Kong, Japan, Laos, the lot just went, let's just do the lot. And the Americans went, let's remake them all. So they did. And most of them get awful.
I've proudly still never seen an American remake of a supposed J horror film.
Yeah. Well, and are any of them worse than Old Boy? Like,
I refuse to watch the remake of Old Boy. Like, why would you do that? Because they can. But yeah. And one of the I love Ring again. Obviously, I've got some of the books, so I really do love it. And also, I distinctly remember reading this first one for the first time, and I started at like 8:45 in the evening, and I stopped at like 2:00 in the morning. I literally read it through in a sitting. It is one of the best kind of horror books I've ever read. It's ridiculously good, and it is more a detective thriller with a supernatural element to it. because the whole thing is trying to discover things. And this is something about ghost stories in general that you'll have fun with this. Every time you watch a ghost movie or paranormal movie now, between halfway and 3/4 of the way through, they will have the detective section where they normally have to go somewhere outside of the city to visit somebody who will give the backstory of who the ghost is and how to stop it. That's the detective bit that comes up in all of them. This is like the whole story. It is so good. The film is so good. I love it. And it just, yeah, there's no other way to say it. It's just damn good.
It put me off seeing it for years because I've seen like images and like individual moments for it and stuff, but that kind of stuff just really just gets under my skin. I was for so long just thinking, no, I'm not going to cope well with this. And then I think at uni I watched Ju-on Grudge, which was bad enough. I thought about 5 years ago.
Yeah,
the death rattle noise, that's horrible. It's just horrible.
My favorite thing with that is that. No, go ahead.
I finally saw this about 5 years ago. I got the courage because I got a nice steel book of it, and finally got the courage, and it was completely blew me away. But it was completely not the film I expected it to be. It was so much more low key and kind of subtle than I expected. It's completely different to something like Ju-on, I'd say.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ju-on is obviously Ju-on the Grudge is obviously the third film in the Ju-on franchise because you did Ju-on the Curse and Ju-on the Curse 2. When the Grudge, when he did the Grudge, Takashi Shimizu, I want to say his name is. Essentially went, I want to do a ghost film, but he was also very much inspired by 80s slasher films. So he literally went, I want to do like Freddy or Jason and have like jump scares and kind of shock every 10 15 minutes.
It's a proper like Ghost Train kind of movie, isn't it?
Yeah, but that is the direction that the Ring sequels go in eventually. Because when they released Ring, on the same day, they released an adaptation of Spiral, which is book 2. And the idea was that you'd go see Ring on one day, and then you'd go see Spiral on the next day. Spiral is not the greatest movie in the world. And the reason is because the book is not the greatest movie in the world. Ring is amazing. Spiral, you go...
That would be weird if the book was a good movie.
Yeah. Ring is amazing. Spiral, you go, I can see what you're doing with it. Lupus, just don't bother. Really not good. So essentially everyone loved Ring and nobody cared for Spiral, which is why the next year they went and did Ring 2. And then you get Sadako Birthday, and then you go through all these like Sadako S, all these kind of things. And eventually it becomes Sadako Jump Scares.
Sadako Returns.
Like that kind of thing. And I think the epitome of all this is when in 2016 you get the amazing Sadako versus Kayako, which is just, at this point, you can tell they're not caring. Kayako being the girl from the Grudge.
Is it as much fun as Freddy versus Jason?
We'll put it this way: there's about as much ghost girl fighting as there is fighting between the two main ones in BVS. Okay, not much. It's the last like 5 minutes.
When does she fight Godzilla?
I don't know yet. Probably will do. But in Sadako vs. Kayako, I saw that at a midnight screening at Abattoir, and there's a bit somewhere in the middle where I'm paraphrasing, but it's not that far off, where they realize they're gonna have to do something, and one of them turns around and goes, "You know what we need to do? Make two ghost girls have a fight with each other." I'm not that far off. Exactly what I said. It's one of those movies where you go,
"What are we?
Sadako
Some kind of
Kayako.
Suicide Squad?"
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, it's called Sadako versus Kayako. You're not caring anymore. And to be honest, it's probably better they went down the jump scare route because it's better than what Loop does. I'm not going to give out spoilers for that, but it goes weird AI, virtual reality, weird stuff. That's just not good. And completely rewrites the first two. Just go with Ring. Imagine no sequels exist. And it is one of the greatest horror movies ever made. Again, I think it became one of the highest grossing things in Japan for like a decade or two. It like box office, won loads of awards, started entire trends, not only in Asia, but in the West as well. Everyone was doing it, you know, one missed call, the lot. So Mike was getting on the proper Ghost Girl bandwagon. And it's really, really damn good.
US one missed call sucks.
I'm not going to watch it. No, there's like 3 or 4. And here's the thing: all these spin-offs that kind of came around because of Ring had like 3 sequels. So there's like 3 one missed call movies. So I don't know why they didn't call them second missed
Two
call, and
missed
third
call.
missed call. Yeah, missed call. Please phone back. That kind of thing.
Voicemail.
Yeah, all these things like Teke Teke, Teke Teke 2, and then you get things like Noroi and stuff where they go into found footage. But yeah, Ring is really good, and it annoys me every time they say Ring and they mean the Japanese version, and they put Samara as the picture, and I'm like, no, wrong film. Stop it. Go away. Do your research and come back when you've done it properly. Or they talk about Ring from '98 and call her Samara. It's like, no, the name is Sadako. Get your facts right. Like it's the equivalent of going, oh, yeah, it's Texas Chainsaw and then calling him Michael. Sod off, different character. Anyway, that's one of my rants over. I know you've missed them. Go watch Ring because it's bloody amazing, and go read the rest of our list. See all the others that made it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Anything else on Ring?
Probably somewhere. Probably that it also started a load of kind of tech horror stuff. So you've got things like Pulse, even things like Shutter, where you've got the cameras, little bits of Ju-on. The Eye has some stuff with security cameras, Noroi. So it very much started a thing of technology being used for ghostly influences, especially in Asia, where the nations are rising and technology is changing that rapidly, that you still have that disconnect between kind of the old traditional way of life and the modern way, and that rams up against each other very, very quickly. And that's a proponent of these kind of films, and Ring, in terms of this cycle, starts it off.
Yeah, it's also kind of a modern, like, witch birding movie, essentially. I was very caught off guard when she's doing, like, the psychic test. And they're like, look, same. And I'm like, I can't read that, but I mean, I'm not super impressed by this magic trick, but okay. Yeah. But I overall, yeah, Ring is fun. I like watching them investigate. I like the visions. The part where they're like, "Oh, this is cut off. You can't see it." I was like, "Yay, VHS is bad." So,
I mean, there's I can't remember if it's in the film, but in the book, there's weird things where they keep having like frames of black, and they realize essentially a lot of it is because it's essentially blinking, and it's Sadako seeing stuff and psychically projecting the visions of that. I can't remember if that's in the film or not, but it's in the book.
I don't think it's
really, it's a really nice touch of literally her will manifesting, and that's part of it.
I
she
always
becomes like a viral infection. It's great.
I always feel like I lose a lot when I watch Japanese films and can't read anything. Like it'll sometimes put a subtitle for like the main thing you're supposed to be reading. Yeah. But I miss out a lot because I can't read Japanese.
It was a plot point for working out what the tape is. So if it was in the film, you'd have remembered it.
Yeah.
Again, I watched it a couple of days ago and can't remember it.
They tell you all the major things, but like I enjoy reading the lorem ipsum in newspaper articles and movies and stuff like that. So, yeah. All right. Sam, did you have anything else on Ring?
No. Good movie. Check it out.
It is. All right. Well, that's it for this version of 50 Unmissable Horror Films / 3 out of 50. But you could go read that whole article that was written by our staff, especially Kieran. Shout out to him for that. He is a horror movie encyclopedia. And
I'm doing a PhD on horror and sci-fi.
Exactly.
Let's be fair.
Yeah. We will be back next week with something different. But until then, guys, where can people find you?
You can find me at SSB Thinks Film and at the Film Magazine, where I've now published my ranking of all the classic Universal horrors, and I went to start with Boris Karloff. So yeah, I've really gone to town on the on the classic horror front this month. So yeah, I've also I've been doing my my 31 days of horror this month. So I've got a horror film per day. Last one we get up tonight, and it, because I didn't get around to watching a new one today, I'm just going to post. I'm just going to post Stars and Lamps tonight because do a mini review of that because I have seen it this week, so I'm counting it.
Hopefully you don't find me anywhere. If you do, I'm K Judgmental in the various places. I obviously did quite a bit for the 50 films ranking. There is a review of The Front Room that will be coming out at some point, and I also went to see Heretic today as well with evil Hugh Grant. this isn't much of a spoiler really for the review. It's kind of written anyway. We'll just go off to get posted. But I would not be surprised. I don't think he'd get nommed for an Oscar, but if Hugh Grant got nommed for a BAFTA, I'm not saying it'll happen, but I wouldn't be surprised because he's really damn good in that movie.
You can find me at Jacob Film Guy, and I'm going to recommend from Holly Carter 5 Twilight wigs that slay and 5 that suck.
That's an amazing. That's come
Incredible.
out. Coming from a non-Twilight fan, it's a great, really fun piece.
Also, Mark wrote this in 2022. 5 hilariously bad horror movie ripoffs.
Oh yeah, that was one where the producer of a lot of them gave a lot of abuse on social media, wasn't it?
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I wish I was getting abused by producers on social media. That's a bummer. That's always my goal when I write a piece, but oh well.
What, was to get the vitriol?
Yes. One time, Richard Spencer's fans just shared an article but never interacted with me. It was a bummer. He's a racist. So let's see. I said that. You can email us. Kieran mentioned this earlier, secondcutpod@gmail.com. You can also find us at Second Cut Pod on various internet platforms. Go to our Redbubble store for the film magazine. That's down in any descriptions. You could buy our swag, or if you don't want material goods because you're about to cross over to the next realm, perhaps become a ghost girl, you can just give us all of your cash via the PayPal link below. So that's it. I think that's all I say. Thank you for listening, and goodbye. Woo!
Adios.
Goodbye. Happy Halloween.
Forever.